Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. So, I had my other brother-in-law on the podcast. Last week, I was recording him. He would have come out, I think, his episode is going to be 2 from this one. He was really good. So there's major competition here in the brother-in-law realms. He was super articulate. But honestly, thank you so much for driving in Storm Kiran, causing all kinds of nightmares around London tonight.
No worries.
It's
I wouldn't
been
miss it for the world.
Thank
I mean,
you
I had
so
to
much.
cancel on you the other week, so I had to make up for it.
So you would miss it for an exam, but not for the world. I'm glad to hear it. So I'm going to start off with this question, simple question, and I'd just love to hear what you're thinking about this. What are you imagining at the moment?
Wow, that's a open-ended, broad question. What am I imagining? When I think about the word imagine, I'm assuming it's kind of like, what are you dreaming? Like that kind of thing. So I guess like my dreams kind of at the moment is a lot to do with like using the creativity that I feel like I've kind of been like building up from like a young age. So I've been playing a lot of like instruments when I was younger. Got my parents to thank for that. Like,
yeah, man.
Just
because your parents were like proper into like practice your piano every day, practice your violin.
And I hated every moment of it.
I'm sure you did.
It really wasn't my decision. But growing up has just made me realize like that's such a thankful thing to look back on.
Yeah.
That they were kind of the ones that persevered through me, like instead of me.
Yeah.
Like they sacrificed so much to like send both me and my sister to like so many lessons. And yeah, like looking back, just being super thankful and now being able to use it in the music that I make.
Yeah.
And it's this is all kind of like a relatively new thing in my life at the moment.
Yeah. So explain that to us. You live by day, you have quite a STEM career, I guess some would call it. Yeah. You work in engineering, civil engineering. Mm-hmm. And by night, you kind of moonlight as a musician. And quite a successful musician, I would add to that. How did that come about? So the civil engineering, where did that start? Why civil engineering? And then lead us nicely into where did the music kind of really come in and pick up as a moonlighting career?
Yeah, where do I begin? I think it all kind of started with like thinking what I was good at. I knew I was like good at maths, decent at the sciences. And then that kind of just like naturally made its way towards the engineering side.
Yeah.
And then I had to think about, what kind of engineering to do. I mean, I feel like in general, like the education system, it's like having to decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
With something so niche as what I chose as civil engineering as a 16, 17-year-old. It's such a big decision because I don't really, like skipping a bit ahead, but I don't really know if I want to be doing civil engineering for my near future already, 2 years into a civil engineering job. And so I went into it choosing a thing that I thought I could use to help people. And civil engineering is like the people's engineering. So I thought, I could use that to kind of bring kind of joy to people's lives in a way that hopefully the people who really need it can get. Yeah. And then so just made my way through uni, just about literally just scraping through.
Okay.
On my results, but
is that just because you don't consider yourself very academic, or was that because you were partying? Why the scrape through?
Oh wow. A lot of reasons. I think I think the academic parts of me were really, a lot of it were from my parents. Like, I don't think I could have got through A-level maths without my mum, like, literally tutoring me every day, helping me get through it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly having all this, like, complete, like, independence and isolation from my parents and having to do it all on my own. It really took me a good few years to kind of figure out how I wanted to, like, live my life, how I need to, like, discipline myself. Yeah, so, like, my first year was definitely... looking back, probably not the best way of doing things. You know, I was definitely finding out like a lot of the independent side of life. But really thankful, like, to say that my Christian faith really kind of came back to me in my second year, and that just really like turned my life around.
Okay.
And so that's actually a major part of my story. Kind of rededicating myself to my faith, because that was what I was brought up with. I was going to church every week and my parents were Christians, and then going to uni, having this new independence, totally falling away, and then like realizing everything that I was kind of chasing to try and get that like joy into my life, kind of filling that hole in my heart, could only really be filled by Jesus. So that second year of uni was a big turning point in my life.
And did that kind of have a really practical shaping effect on the way that you approached your work?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like,
because I think sometimes faith is maybe comes across as quite an abstract idea, whereas quite a few people I've spoken to have articulated more in terms of it funneled itself through very practical, very often just things which take real dedication and daily discipline, really.
No, yeah, definitely it played into my work, and it kind of gave me like a repurpose into why I'm doing this degree, why I'm doing this job. And like and it is all in good, like being in like a, you know, a non-Christian environment, but, you know, being that kind of like trying to be like a light in that place. But there was something in my mind that's always wanted to do something very direct to bring something to people's lives. And this is kind of where I like rediscovered my music. And I'd loved, you know, listening to music, especially like kind of like chilled instrumental beats. And I loved listening to just really like nostalgic video game soundtracks. I
mean, that's niche.
It is pretty niche.
That's a niche taste in music.
It is pretty niche, but then you see these views that these like YouTube videos are getting on like old video game soundtracks, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think this is pretty.
This is a whole new world for me. Are we talking like millions of people tuning in and listening to nostalgic video game soundtrack? Honestly,
like the Skyrim soundtrack has got like 25 million views on one of their videos.
Right.
And probably a lot of them, but
that's major commitment.
So yeah, I love listening to all that. I obviously had a musical background, so I just thought, how about if I try to kind of combine my music knowledge and experience with like the kind of like my faith side of things, put it all together, learn music production, use my instrument like abilities and put it into a song, like an instrumental song. And that's kind of where it all started.
It's crazy. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about, obviously I think so many people aspire to have some kind of side hustle in their digital space at the moment, whether that be a vlog, a blog, a channel about coffee drinking or whatever. So many people aspire to the position that you've kind of found yourself in. How did you climb from someone that learned piano at home under forceful, not quite forceful, but how did you go about, what was that process of climbing out of 4 years of civil engineering to building this quite successful account on Spotify, basically?
Yeah, I think I would say if you have a passion in something, like a real deep passion, and if you genuinely work hard for it and you like put in the hours, there's a very high possibility that you will be able to get to a position where you thought that would never be achievable a few years ago.
What does the hours mean though? Because we're not talking the hours like over a week here, are we?
No, like it's got to be like real grueling hours. Like for me, my music time is mainly from like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Every day?
Most days, yeah. Maybe not like all those hours sometimes, but it's those hours when you don't have anything on your music program in front of you. You've literally just got a blank piece of paper or whatever, and you just have to sit through there and get through those like mental blocks in your head. And that is the biggest challenge. But every time I've got past that block, that's when all the enjoyment and the joy and the passion just kicks in, and my work rate just kind of flows from there.
Yeah. How do you get over that mental block? Because that's obviously a term really like that applies to the imagination. Basically, your imagination is not firing. It's not producing any new material for you to go on. What's your process in overcoming the block in the imagination?
Honestly, this is a question that I'm still trying to grapple through. I've heard a lot of answers from lots of different people about this, which is good, which means I'm like...
Not alone.
Not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, alone. It's not just you that struggles with
this.
No,
I think every creative person has an issue with the block, you know. And some of the things that I'm trying to do is making the most of the time where I'm not able to actively work on my own music. So, for example, if I'm in the office in my civil engineering day job and, you know, I'm able to do some work that's not too, like, mentally taxing on me, just stick on my earphones and just listen to, like, music that inspires me.
Yeah.
Not just, like, kind of, like, any kind of music, but really, like, just start making your own playlist of, like, music that inspires you.
Yeah.
The type of music that you want to make, and... you know, it all stays in your mind somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, you won't specifically remember some of the things, but it does stick it up.
It kind of triggers somewhere. Like later on. And actually, that's something that I've really found in my process of all of the creative exploits that I try and journey down is it's in the moments where you're not actively doing the creative task at hand, where your subconscious can really be working on some stuff that later in the day, later in the week, you can return to. Because often I find with writing, for example, at the moment, at the start of every chapter of my book is a fairy tale. And it is unbelievably hard to come up with a fairy tale that's not like a copy, basically.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge to be unique enough, but not so unique that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still classified as a fairy tale. I mean, I haven't had an expert read any of it, so I don't know if any of my fairy tales are actually fairy tales. We'll find out one day. It's actually, if you come to sitting down and writing a fairy tale or any kind of story, I found that if you don't come with an idea that you've pre-baked, you've prepared the ingredients, you're really not going to get many places like by just sitting down and just saying, oh, I'm just going to write a fairy tale now. The process began when I was having a shower, when I was having a conversation, when I was eating breakfast, when I was walking, when I had another conversation with someone else. The process of building them stories is gently ticking away in the back of my mind the whole day. And obviously that's a similar kind of process that you're talking about, is when you're it's building ideas and inspiration throughout the day, so that when it comes to crunch time, it doesn't feel like such a daunting blank canvas. So one of the big questions that I'm exploring at the moment when it comes to our ability to imagine and whether everyone is creative and can everyone be really creative is the effect that culture has on our creativity. Do you feel, as someone, you've kind of got a bit of a real mixture, a real diverse mixture of cultures inputting into your life. You're just what cultures have an impact on you, firstly?
Yeah, so I was born in South Korea. My parents, all my family are from Korea and are Korean. And I moved to Wales when I was 3 years old. Grew up in Wales all my life, in Cardiff. And then as I went to uni in Bath, my parents moved out to London, and London is where I've been ever since.
Ever since. So, Korea, Wales, South Korea, Wales, London, Bath. That's quite a mixture of cultures. How has that played an effect on your pursuit of creative things? And after that, I'm going to ask you, just so you can keep it wearing in your brain, is how has that affected your mental health? So firstly, let's start with creativity. How has your cultural mixing pot, how has that affected your creativity?
Yeah, I would say that diversity of culture I have really tried to suppress for most of my life, which is really sad looking back on it. I think growing up in like a majority, as a minority, in a predominantly white culture, I specifically remember in times in my childhood where I would pray to God and say, God, when I wake up, can you make me white or not Korean? I just hated that, like, being different, but you know, it's not completely like my fault, because I've actually grown up with, you know, like racism going on around in my life, and I think any kind of thing that was like brought negativity into my life, I obviously, like, as a child, you don't want to like accept that into you, do you? So I associated my difference in ethnicity as like my weakness and something that was not desirable. And honestly, like, that just kind of stuck with me for so long. And it's only more recently where I've really like embraced and been able to embrace that part of my life.
So obviously, like, one of the conversations I've had with a few people is about it takes a tremendous amount of courage to be creative. And based upon your experiences, did you just feel like perhaps because of your circumstances, being creative or being overtly creative and confident was almost too much of a risk because you were just trying to not stand out any more than you already did?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, one of the reasons I think that I didn't want to be doing these like music lessons that my parents were taking to was that it was like a stereotypically Asian thing to do, to like be good at like instruments and play the piano or whatever. And you know, all of these things were just playing around in my mind, like, oh, what are my friends gonna say if they like see me playing the violin one day? You know? And that really sadly like made those decisions in my life where like I stopped playing in the orchestra. I gave up both piano and violin before I actually took my grade 8 exams in both of them. And that was just, it is just really sad just looking back on it. And that definitely was a big hindrance in my creativity, in being able to embrace the creativity that was a real blessing in my life.
Because I guess that's one of the weird things about it, is that particularly that specific stereotype that you're mentioning of dedication to music practice that comes out of quite a lot of like Asian cultures. is a beautiful commitment.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a real, obviously there's some serious discipline and serious hard work that is highly encouraged. But the output of that is mainly good things, I would have thought. I'm sure that there's stories around of people's relationships with their parents breaking down because of it.
Yeah.
But the amount of times you have a conversation with a musician or something where they said, I used to hate it, or a dancer that said, my mum just used to make me dance every Saturday and I hated it, but now I'm a professional ballerina. It's so sad that them stereotypes come back round and are used as a baseball bat against our head, isn't it? I guess as well, just because I know your life a bit, you also had to reconcile the fact that you played a lot of football with that as well. So was a big part of your community like Welsh football lads, basically?
Not really. I mean, football is obviously always just popular wherever you go. And I think my desire to wanting to play football didn't really come out of any kind of like peer pressure or anything. It was a really natural thing. And like, because I was like quite decent at it, I like kind of got swept up with a lot of like the football culture, especially at university. And that's a whole nother topic, like
I'm sure.
Sport culture at uni. But there's a lot of like, I mean, if I thought that I had to be not different when I was growing up at uni, that in my football team, that was like a whole different story. If you stood out in any kind of different way in that kind of environment, you would just get like picked at instantly. It would be like instantly noticed, and it would just be a negative thing. And like, really sadly, I've seen like examples of this, and especially in my life. And then again, that whole like race thing as well, having to really suppress that kind of part of culture inside of me, that I think really did kind of block a lot of that.
So for the early part of your life, well, until fairly recently, all the way up until uni, culture and creativity, maybe they were working against each other a little bit in terms of the racism, the stereotyping, the laying low. Has there been examples either through that early bit or examples now where you feel like your cultural diversity has enhanced your creativity?
I think I'm really seeing like the beginning of like embracing that part of me, that inherent identity, and that's just like playing out into like so many parts of my life. And like, definitely this is something to do with like when I like re-accepted Jesus into my life and really realizing that, I should love myself for who I am. This is, how I was created. It's something that should be celebrated. And that's really taken, a good few years to, for myself to start believing and to really take that into my heart. And I'm really now seeing like how this is all playing out in my creativity, in my music. It's a lot of that success in my music I'm seeing in such a short time. It's definitely because I have embraced like those like cultural sides of me, and being able to express who I really am into a piece of music. And clearly people like hearing that, so which is why it's doing quite well.
What's your relationship like with your imagination at the moment? Like, is it something that you've really ever thought about? Because one of the big reasons that I started the book and this podcast is to talk about our relationship with our imagination, in the sense that it's a factory for beauty and anxiety. Clearly with your Spotify channel, you are really creating beautiful stuff, even if lo-fi is not really your thing. But do you consider yourself to have a really positive relationship with your imagination, or would you not talk about it in them terms?
I think thinking about my imagination from a young age, it was a big part of like how I would kind of like entertain myself when I was little. Like I'd be creating so many like cool, fun scenarios in my head with like, you know, not a lot of like things to like play with. Like my parents, I think, did a great job of like keeping away like the Game Boys as they were like developing for as long as possible in my life, and so I think that really helped kind of fuel that good part of imagination inside of me. But then really recently, like I've been reading this book called Live No Lies by John Mark Comer, and
I have to confess, my mum got me that book for Christmas, and I basicly like got rid of it as soon as.
Wait, I think that's the book I'm reading. I think it's that copy.
It's got the. For all those listening, it's John Mark Comer, isn't it?
Yeah.
John Mark Comer is a author that's rose to quite a level of success as a Christian author, and quite a lot of his books were very quotable in the Christian community, and as soon as someone becomes too quotable, I want to push back. And he wrote a famous book. What his most famous one was about
the ruthless elimination of hurry.
Ruthless elimination of hurry, which I have to be honest, I completely hate the sentiment of that because we're all dying.
I actually haven't read that one yet. So
I've kind of pushed his books away, but I'm glad to hear that this particular one is having an effect, and maybe it's going to change my mind. Sorry, carry on. How is it affecting you?
It's honestly like been really good. Dare I say, like life-changing.
Wow. And I just got rid of it. Have more respect for books, man.
I'll give it back. I'll give it back to you when I'm done.
Okay. I won't read it.
But he like talks about like kind of our thoughts in a way that I haven't really thought about before. You know, I've always kind of thought like all my thoughts are my own, including imagination, dreams, or whatever. But because of my Christian faith, like I am kind of able to distinguish like what is a good thought, what is a good imagination, to what is a bad thought and a bad imagination, which I know that I shouldn't be, you know, like having in my mind. And this book, I think, has really like allowed me to understand that like these bad thoughts aren't my own.
Yeah.
And that brought, I think, a lot of freedom into my life in knowing that, you know, that's not me. Yeah. Those like bad parts of the imagination are not me. Yeah. And it's not what God intended either.
Yeah.
And wants in my life. And I could kind of just like really then separate those two parts of me.
Yeah.
Give all those like bad parts of my imagination over to God, saying, okay, you take care of that, and then just really being able to then focus and enhance on all the good parts of my imagination and my thoughts.
I think that's a really interesting one, and I'm going to do 2 episodes coming up. One which I'm going to do about intrusive thoughts, in the sense that right the way along the spectrum, whether that's something, a major mental health issue, or just the everyday kind of thoughts that we have, imaginings that we have that we would really rather not be having in. And then the other one that I'm going to talk about is stuff like have a conversation about lust and imagination, and greed, imagination and jealousy, them kind of topics of imagining that you have something that you don't have. And maybe we would straight away say it's like kind of questionable things that you don't have that you want. So that's really powerful. What to you does it mean to kind of hand over bad imaginings? Because I think that's quite an abstract thought in a lot of ways. Where do you put them, in a sense?
All of that just has to come through prayer for me, like, well, in my opinion, and being able to like physically say, like, God, I just leave this at your feet.
Right.
And knowing that, like, you know, God's all powerful and able to do these things for me, it really then brings this sense of relief and like liberation in my heart, knowing that, you know, I don't need to, like, this isn't a part of me anymore. It's given away now.
This is a very serious question, which you can tell by my face. So, Jordan Peterson suggests this question as a way of identifying how creative someone is.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a slight variation on the question that I asked people last week when I was recording some episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to name 5 uses for a bathtub.
Oh, you asked me something similar the other week. Now I've got to kind of do the same on the spot. 5 uses of a bathtub. A emergency water storage device.
Wow. Who would have thought a bathtub as a water storage device?
I don't know why, but it's this, like, I remember like hearing someone say, oh, if you're in like a disaster, like an emergency disaster, one of the first things you should do is just fill your bathtub up with water from your tap. And then that's just clean water.
Wow, this is very useful information for everyone to know. Thank you.
Making sure the bathtub is clean though.
Yeah.
If you are
you don't want a dirty bathtub.
No.
Not if you're going to be drinking out of it.
No.
That's
one. That's one. Have a bath.
2. Okay.
Have a shower, because our bathtub is only really being used as a shower.
Okay. So basically just a place to stand when you're having a shower.
I think it's good to just be in your bathtub if there's an earthquake.
Right.
I don't know whether it's the bathroom in general, because apparently it's like covered by pipes. So it's like a good protected room.
Wow.
But I would probably get in my bath as well.
Yeah. I feel as though the bathtub is a real place of safety.
It does feel really safe there. I remember hiding in a bathtub in hide and seek when I was younger. I'm feeling really comfortable just lying in a bathtub.
Yeah, I mean, it is peculiar when I think about it. As a place for alleviating pressures of mental health, and also a place for inspiring great imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful place, the bathtub.
Mm.
I also heard of a guy rowing across the channel, the English Channel, in a bathtub. So I feel as though a boat is probably another water-related bathtub use. I would like to suggest that, based upon your answers, that Mr. Peterson would maybe think you were maybe a little bit creative.
A little bit.
A little bit creative. The theory is that the more divergent your uses for a bathtub are, the further away they are from its actual use, the more creative you are. So its actual use is bathtub. So anything to do with getting in the bathtub is still quite similar to the premise of what a bathtub is actually being used for. I feel as though you could have really pushed it a bit harder there. Final words. I would love to hear what your encouragement would be to people that... I've spoken to a lot of people like this in this situation that maybe have studied something that they don't enjoy, or they're working in a job which they find quite limiting maybe, and would love to break free into pastures new, which are a bit more creatively fulfilling. What words would you give to that person?
This is something that I would definitely say to myself as well, being in a similar situation. But firstly, what you have studied and what you are currently doing now and have done for whatever number of years, like that's not your entire life. That you don't have to be in that job, in that sector for the rest of your life, especially if you don't enjoy it. If you enjoy it, that's great. But if you don't enjoy it, like, you don't have to think that you're trapped. Sometimes I think like, oh no, I've taken too niche of a degree to do anything other than civil engineering.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not true. And just know that, you know, you're not trapped.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you have found that passion, something creative, really try and go for it and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And don't give up.
Yeah.
And really try to achieve a target or a goal that you've had in mind.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what that's going to do. Because I remember starting off and thinking, wow, could I imagine like my monthly listeners like having an extra 0 on it by the end of the year?
Yeah.
It did. And then I was like, at the start of that year, I was like, oh no, surely this can't happen again. Another 0 at the end of the next year.
Yeah.
It happened again. And like, you just don't know what will happen. So might as well give it a really good go.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Similar question. What would you say to people that are closing themselves down because they're struggling with being different, whether that be culturally or something different? How would you encourage that person based upon what you've learned through your journey?
Really love yourself for who you are. Do not let anyone's opinions or words or thoughts like bring you down or get into your head. Like, you were created in this way for a reason, and it's something to be celebrated, and it's something to be cherished, and it's something for you to explore as well.
Thank you so much for, again, driving in Storm Kieran to come and have this conversation with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real eye-opener for me, I think. Just kind of...
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.